Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. After the much publicized because of the cool Miami Vice-like video, maybe I'm dating myself. Probably something reference that's some terminalist or something more updated than that. Lioness. After the video showing a U.S. airstrike on what was ostensibly a drug smuggling boat out of Venezuela, escalating the war on drugs, I'd say. Direct strikes from the United States, taking out identified members of drug cartels. After these cartels had been designated as terrorist organizations by the Trump administration. Secretary of State Rubio had this to say, basically, more to come.
The United States has long, for many, many years, established intelligence that allow us to interdict and stop drug boats. And we did that. And it doesn't work. Interdiction doesn't work because these drug cartels, what they do is they know they're going to lose, 2% of their cargo. They bake it into their economics. What will stop them is when you blow them up, when you get rid of them. The President of the United States is going to wage war on narco-terrorist organizations. This one was operating in international waters, headed towards the United States to flood our country with poison. And under President Trump, those days are over.
And it wasn't a one-off. Rubio says strikes like these will happen again.
Daniel DePetris, our next guest, suggests that attempting to kill your way out of the cartels is a bit naive. He joins us now for more on this topic, as well as others. We'll talk about other theaters. Daniel DePetris is a fellow at Defense Priorities, as a syndicated foreign affairs columnist for the Tribune and Newsweek. Daniel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So, develop that. Why is Marco Rubio being naive?
Well, look, I think what the administration is obviously trying to do is deter other cartels and criminal organizations in Latin America from sending, drugs to the United States. And they made the calculation that the best way to do that is to kill, do a flashy symbolic strike against a single boat in the Southern Caribbean that may or may not be carrying drugs. We don't really know because the administration hasn't given us any information on it. The reason I think is pretty naive is because we've done this before. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we've attempted to, help regional governments essentially kill our way out of the problem. And what happens is, at best, we have a temporary lull in the drug shipments. But these organizations essentially, find different routes and different ways of adapting to these things. And lo and behold, the drugs keep pouring into across the southern border. So we've had a history of this. We've had 3 decades of history of trying to kill our way out of the problem, and it's not working.
Yeah,
that's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if that was the sole approach, but of course it isn't. Even this, the big splash Janine Pirro made, announcing the largest seizure of meth manufacturing chemicals in U.S. history, 700,000 pounds sent from China to the U.S. via the Sinaloa cartel that were seized by the federal government. But we've had, this is the biggest, but we've had splashy interdictions like this before too. And so I guess the larger question is not whether this is these are tactics that are part of a larger strategy, but whether the larger strategy represents any sort of break from what we've tried previously without great success.
Right. You hit the nail on the head. And the fact is, I don't know what the administration's strategy is, quite frankly. They seem to be wanting to tackle the supply side of the problem, to take out the cartels where they are, where they operate, send more units to interdict certain shipments across the border, weak points across the border. And, I think if we really want to manage this issue, we can't solve it. Just trying to win the war on drugs is like trying to win the war on poverty. It's an unwinnable war. The best we can do is really chip away at the problem and manage it to an adequate level. And I think what the administration needs to do beyond the supply side is really think about how do we decrease the demand and limit the amount of resources that the cartels scoop up every single day.
Maybe
I'd be more.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but maybe we should just do what we did with the domestic mafia in this country. Just take over all their rackets and make them government rackets. Drugs, prostitution, gambling, right? I mean, we haven't legalized prostitution yet, but it's coming if some New York City councilmen and Illinois state legislators have their way. But isn't I mean, it is to some extent, yeah, we had the RICO and we had the prosecutions, but what we really did is have the government take over a bunch of the rackets.
Yeah, I mean, nothing shocks me anymore, right? If the administration announces something like that wouldn't shock me in the least. But the fact is, like today, I don't know what the Trump administration is trying to do in terms of what their overarching approach is here. I mean, the war on drugs is a failed approach, and we have 5+ decades showing it's a failed approach. We have 75,000, 80,000 Americans dying every year of overdoses. So the numbers obviously tell us that focusing strictly on supply, which is my point, is just a failed way to do it. You have to tackle supply, but you can't exclusively look at it. You also have to look at the demand. And I don't know if the administration understands that or is just purposely neglecting it. I don't know.
Well, and and part of it is you look at the suppliers too. And we had a conversation a couple weeks ago with investigative journalist who follows the cartels and follows what's happening within the Sheinbaum government in Mexico. And the suggestions that's been made, including by a former, basically cartel distributor who turned one of the two brothers, I can't remember their cartel, but who turned state's evidence against the cartels and now, of course, is, in hiding, was essentially that Trump is taking a different approach here. He is shaking the foundations of both the corruption within the Mexican government and some of the infrastructure with the cartels. Now, as you say, I mean, these are multi-billion-dollar organizations. They're resilient, but it was just interesting to hear an inside perspective on both the impact that the Trump administration is having on cartel infrastructure, as well as on perhaps providing incentives for the Mexican government to be less cordial with the cartels, to be generous.
Yeah, I mean, let's see, right? I mean, it's still very early on, and it could very well be that I return to your program in a couple months and have a mea culpa, Yeah. But look, I mean, there's no question in my mind that there is foundational systemic corruption within Mexico.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of collusion between certain Mexican politicians and the cartels. It's the way they do business. It's the way they do business in Mexico. Not everybody. I don't want to generalize everybody,
right?
But there are specific people in there that the United States knows, and frankly, I think the Mexican government knows it as well, that collaborate with cartels for either personal enrichment or because it makes their jobs easier. So there's no question that is occurring.
Moving to the Middle East, I mean, there was this report earlier in the week that we haven't really had a chance to discuss, but I'll get your perspective on it, that the Trump administration is weighing a plan to relocate Gaza's 2 million residents and place them in territory to be determined under U.S. control for at least a decade. The proposal is called the Great Trust, which goes back to this sort of woozy vision of Gaza being the Riviera of the Mediterranean. What is your perspective on? I mean, the idea of Trump trying to disentangle us from foreign adventurism, and then we would have control from considerable distance over 2 million Gazans for a decade.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if Trump doesn't have a coherent vision of what the Middle East is. It's not exactly a surprise, I don't think. I mean, campaign, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, Dan, because Trump had a very, very, positive way of talking about the Middle East that was appealing to the American voter. And that was essentially, we've done everything wrong there. Every time we try to solve a problem in this region, we make it worse. And the best way for the United States to proceed is essentially to disassociate ourselves from the muck of the Middle East, the internal politics that can't be solved by the Americans. And, if this plan is an actual serious plan the administration is reviewing, it would be the exact opposite of what Trump campaigned on. It would essentially mesh the United States in a part of the region that is hopeless, and that's a charitable word to use. So I hope the administration decides to not pursue this. I don't know if it's an actual formal plan that the administration is just looking at, or if this was actually like a brainchild of somebody within the White House. I hope it's the former and not the latter, because this is not something that we should pursue. And frankly, practically speaking, it wouldn't work because the region is not going to cooperate with a scheme like this.
Moving to Eastern Europe, I saw that Putin and Xi were getting along famously. And then enter Erdogan, Turkey's autocrat. And the suggestion that Erdogan may be the key to getting Putin to move towards some sort of deal and a cessation of hostilities. Certainly, Xi is not going to be that linchpin. But do you place any stock in Erdogan as some sort of Qatarian-esque broker here?
Well, I think Erdogan has proven that he is interested in resolving the war, or at least establishing some sort of a ceasefire. And he has hosted discussions between the Russians and the Ukrainians before. To the extent that Erdogan has any power whatsoever to impact the outcome or to convince Putin to sign on to something, I think is a different question. Just because you're a facilitator and want something doesn't necessarily mean you have the power to bring it about. And I think that's captures Erdogan's dilemma right now. So I'm glad he's offering his diplomatic services, but I wouldn't put too much stock in Erdogan's ability to actually pull a rabbit out of the hat.
And what about Modi, the Indian PM? I mean, he got sideways with Trump for doing business with Russia, but he met with Putin. He's pushing a peaceful resolution on Ukraine after Trump imposed increased tariffs on India for his doing business with Russia. And so the question is Modi, does he have sort of economic pressure he can bring to bear for doing deals with Putin and for Putin wanting access to the Indian market? Or is he just middling Russia and the United States here without much real prospect of being impactful?
Yeah, I mean, I think Modi is an interesting character. He does have economic power over the Russians. I mean, India is now the top purchaser of Russian, seaborne crude oil, and that gives the Russians tens of billions of dollars a year, which they're obviously using to finance the war in Ukraine. So if Modi chose to stop buying Russian oil, sure, I mean, it would impact Russia's budget and complicate Putin's decision-making to an extent. Of course, Modi's not going to do that. So theoretically, he could impact it. Practically speaking, Modi has shown no inclination whatsoever to, decrease imports of Russian oil, let alone stop imports of Russian oil. And frankly, if he did that, oil prices globally would go up sporadically, pretty exponentially. So right now, it's the theory of the case is yes, but practically speaking, he's not going to be doing that for India's own domestic reasons and for pure politics.
And the Europeans, what did you make of the report that Ursula von der Leyen's plane lost all GPS approach on in travel to Bulgaria, and that perhaps it was Putin that was jamming the EU president's plane's GPS to send a message about, basically how weak and impotent he thinks she and they are?
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly plausible explanation. I mean, the Russians have engaged in significant sabotage operations in Europe over the last 2 to 3 years. And it's really an easy lever for the Russians to pull to retaliate against, European arms sales and financial support to the Ukrainians. So that is extremely plausible to me. Fortunately, nobody was killed in this incident, but it just goes to show you that the Russians are willing to, be risky in pursuit of a war that Putin seems willing to carry on for years. And, for somebody like Trump who wants to end it reasonably, I would add, it's very discouraging.
Well,
to put it mildly.
And like I said, doesn't it indicate, he just is not at all impressed by Western Europe.
No. Neither is Trump.
Well, yeah,
that's
true. Well, yeah, but she's reading it right, unfortunately. All right, last question. This is an easy one. So North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un went to see Putin, too. Everybody's going to see Putin. And he brought his own toilet so that nobody gets Kim Jong-un's DNA. Is anybody really interested in Kim Jong-un's DNA?
Oh, God, I hope not. I would hope not. If we are, we where are we as a society and civilization?
We're
in deep.
Is somebody trying to clone him for Team America, a sequel to Team America or something? I don't know. It was a bizarre story. I just thought it was sort of funny because he's a risible figure. Anyway, Daniel DePetris, fellow at Defense Priorities and a syndicated foreign affairs columnist for the Chicago Tribune and Newsweek. Daniel DePetris, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer. Gain insight into building strong marriages and raising godly children with Focus on the Family with Jim Daly. Each weekday at 11:30 a.m. on our sister station, AM 1160, Hope for Your Life.